Hello guys, good morning. Good morning everyone. Kamusta kayong lahat? So, today we have a new topic that we will be talking about, and this is part of the introduction to criminology, So, today we're going to be talking about the four categories of criminals according to the classification of Cesare Lombroso. So, if you are interested for this, sit back and let us learn. Okay guys, so we have here our topics. We have the Atavistic Criminals, that's the first classification. Then we have insane criminals, we have Criminoloid or occasional criminals, and we have last, which is the criminal by passion. As I mentioned, this is the classification provided by Cesare Lombroso. No? So before we proceed to the discussion, let us first have a brief background to who Cesare Lombroso is. No? Of course, if you are studying criminology, probably you have an idea already who Cesare Lombroso is. And for those who do not, we have here Cesare Lombroso is an Italian criminologist, and he is the founder of the Positivist School of Criminology. No? And most of us know from the field of criminology, we know Cesare Lombroso as the father of the criminology profession. Okay, so that's the brief background of who Cesare Lombroso is. Then we have a lot of contribution provided or given by Cesare Lombroso, such as in the field of physiognomy, psychiatry. We have on the early eugenics, and we have also on the concept of social Darwinism. And some of those will be tackled today, since we are going to be talking about his classification of criminals based on his study. So it's important also for us to know who is a criminal, since we are talking about the classification or categories of criminals. So we have here the criminological definition of criminals. We have a criminal is a person who violated a criminal law or has committed an act labeled by the society as a crime. We have another definition for the term crime, but that is the legal definition. So if we're talking about the legal concept of crime, then we talk about crime is an so if we're going to be talking about the legal concept of criminal, so criminal is a person who has been convicted of a crime accused to him, convicted by the court of a final judgment of a crime accused to him. So that's how they define it legally. But since we're just talking about the criminological aspect of this topic, then we adapt this definition, which is criminal is a person who violated the criminal law or has committed an act that is labeled by the society as a crime. Okay? So enough for the introduction. Let's jump into the categories of criminals. The first category that we will be talking about is, of course, the atavistic criminals. Who are atavistic criminals? So basically, atavistic criminals are a group of criminals that are known as the born criminals. Cesare Lombroso has been famous for this concept of classifying criminals. He believed that there are really individuals who has that inborn predicaments or traits that can be classified as as a sign or symptoms of someday he will become a criminal, So basically, meron siya yung mga tinitignan or may mga classify siya under his study of physiognomy, wherein he believes that meron tayong stigma, meron tayong mga atavistic traits na pwedeng pagbasihan para masabi natin na yung isang tao na ito will become a criminal someday. And some of them are, facial features, such as the shape of the ears, the shape of the nose, the shape of the eyes, and the shape of the face itself, the measurement of the hands, if compared, and some other things like that. So he is basically looking at the physical characteristic of an individual, and he will be judging them based on that based on those physical characteristic. So the basis of Lombroso of stating that this person will become a criminal in the future is that the physical features of that person. Why did he come up with this? There's a study that he conducted. He visited a certain prison wherein he profiled those criminals that are imprisoned therein, and measures their hands, their feet, their head, and take note of the different prominent physical or facial characteristic of those criminals. So kumbaga tinali niya lahat yung mga detalye na ito. Then he come up with a conclusion that majority of the criminals are looking like this, majority of criminals has this physical characteristic or physical features, facial features, and so on. That's why he come up with his concept of born criminals. But of course, right now we're no longer using this concept, but still it's important that we take note of this contribution or this development before, since before they came from, believing that crime or criminals are possessed by evil. So I think it's a good development during that time. But as of today, we're no longer adopting it, since it's not really that accurate to this. It's not really that believable already in our current era. Okay, so we just take note of this contribution. No, pag sinabi nating Atavistic Criminals, this is one of the category of criminals proposed by Lombroso, wherein he believed that there are physical characteristics, physical traits that can be used in order to determine whether a person has a higher tendency to become a criminal in the future, no? Based on his findings on the study that he conducted. He believed on born criminals, na meron mga pinapanganak na mga tao na meron na talagang high tendency to become criminals in the future, and they are classified under the Atavistic Criminals. Okay, so that's the first category. Let's jump into the second category, which is the insane criminals. Insane criminals refers to the group of criminals who become a criminal not by birth. This is, take note that these criminals, that this group of criminals are not born criminals, but rather they become a criminal because of some changes made onto the functioning of their brain. Of course, in the field of psychology and in the field of science, it's noted that the brain has something to do with the behavioral changes of a certain person. So if something happens to the brain, if the brain is damaged, was damaged, or has been altered in many different forms, such as taking substances that may affect the brain, or suffering from injuries or illnesses that has alter the functioning of the brain, then there will be a notable changes into the behavior of that person. So there are tendencies that sometimes those individuals who their brain functioning has been altered due to some circumstances beyond their control, such as illnesses or injuries or any other circumstances that may affect the functioning of the brain, will display these different or changes into their behavior. And sometimes the changes in the behavior of that person as a result of a brain injury or illnesses or other circumstances will become an abnormal behavior, and that abnormal behavior are sometimes labeled as crime, depends on what society he lives in. So definitely those will be classified as insane criminals. They become criminals because of some damages or some changes in their brain functioning which affects their behavior, no? So ito yung mga merong sakit sa pag-iisip, at dahil dyan, no, we know for a fact that kung meron kang sakit sa pag-iisip, hindi mo ma-assess masyado yung mga nangyayari sa paligid mo, which sometimes your behavior will contradict the normal behavior and sometimes be labeled as crime. Of course, they don't feel empathy. Yun yung mga wala sa kanila, and that really affects their behavior, di ba? Hindi sila, kumbaga, they don't have conscience sometimes, or any other brain problems that can result into criminality, no? So kung ganyan ang circumstances ng isang criminal na yan, he is a criminal because of some alteration of the brain functioning, then definitely he will be classified under the category of insane criminals. Just an addition to this topic, in our criminal law, those who committed the crime because of insanity are not punishable for their crime. They are exempted because of, they don't have intellect. Hindi nila alam yung ginagawa nila. They don't know they cannot distinguish right from wrong. Therefore, they cannot be liable for their action. No? They will not be responsible for their action because in the first place, they cannot determine if what they're doing is really right or wrong. So those who commit crime because of this, because of insanity, will be exempted to criminal liability. But that does not mean that there is no intervention that the government will do in order to address this problem. Of course, this individual or those individuals who commits crime because of insanity will still be taken into the custody of the government, and they will be subjected to rehabilitation or treatment, and they will be spending the rest of their life being treated until they are already sane enough, matino na sila para ibalik sa community at maging productive member of the community. So that's the intervention that they're doing. It does not really mean that if you are insane, you committed a crime, then you will be set free and you're free again to commit or to do whatever you want to do. So there are interventions that the governments are doing also to address these problems. Okay, so that's it with regards to insane criminals. Let's jump into the third category of criminals, which are the criminaloid na tinatawag, or occasional criminals, or sometimes they call it habitual criminals. Okay, so who are these criminals? These criminals are those who commit crimes in response to situation and chances. So basically, this group of criminals only commit crimes when they are in a situation that they don't have any choice but rather to commit a crime, and there is an opportunity being provided to them. Like for example, Mr. Pedro is very hungry. He doesn't have any money. He doesn't have anyone who can help him to have food in order to satisfy his hunger. Then it came to his attention that there are some bread laying on the table, and there are no people that are guarding na nagbabantay dito sa bread. Walang bantay at merong pagkain na nakalapag lang sa mesa, nakalapag lang sa isang table, and it happens that Mr. Pedro is very hungry, he doesn't have any money, no one will help him, and there is this bread and no one is guarding it. So it's an opportunity for Mr. Pedro to address his immediate problem, which is the hunger that he is feeling. So Mr. Pedro took the bread, ate it, went away. Basically, he committed the crime of theft, because that's taking someone's food or someone's property without their knowing and without their consent. So that's literally a crime in our criminal law. So, in that circumstances, clearly Mr. Pedro committed a crime. And how would Mr. Pedro be classified as criminals based on the category of criminals provided by Lombroso? Will he be considered as insane criminals? Of course, no. I did not mention that Mr. Pedro has some brain illness. Is he a born criminal? I did not mention any circumstances that will classify or that will qualify him to become a born criminals. But why did he become a criminal? It's because of chances and his immediate situation, the problem that he is facing. And there's an opportunity provided for him to satisfy that problem. Therefore, in this case, Mr. Pedro will be classified as criminaloid, occasional criminals, or habitual criminals if Mr. Pedro only commits that crime in occasional situation. But if Mr. Pedro is committing that crime every now and then, Ibig sabihin, nagnanakaw pa rin siya kahit hindi naman siya gutom, kahit may pagkain naman siya, kahit pwede namang may magpautang sa kanya or pwede naman siyang magtrabaho para magkaroon ng pera. Instead, he choose to steal, he choose na magnakaw, na manggulang ng ibang tao kahit meron namang mga opportunities na pwede niyang gawin para ma-address yung kanyang problem. Then therefore, he is no longer classified as criminaloid or occasional criminals because he is committing crime as part of his lifestyle already. So hindi na siya pasok doon. But only if Mr. Pedro commits the crime in situations na kung saan halimbawa nagtratrabaho naman siya pero talagang kulang yung kanyang sinusweldo or walang natitira sa kanya at nagugutom na naman siya, and yun na naman yung gagawa na naman siya ng crime para lang ma-addressan yung kanyang problem, then he will be classified as occasional criminal. Okay? So in comparison to insane criminals, even if Mr. Pedro committed a crime because of his situation, nakakaawa naman siya, it does not mean that he will not be or he will be exempted from criminal responsibility. He is still criminally responsible. The fact, ang punto dito is kahit anong hirap ng isang tao, he is not excused or he is not allowed still to commit a crime just to address his problem, di ba? Kasi meron yung mga halimbawa yung isang mother na kung saan wala na siyang pampagatas sa kanyang anak, nagugutom na yung kanyang anak, mamamatay sa gutom yung kanyang anak pag hindi niya napagatas. So ang ginawa niya, pumunta sa isang shopping mall, nag-shoplift, nahuli. Yun yung kanyang dahilan, even if it's true that indeed meron siyang anak na gutom na, will not excuse her of criminal responsibility. She is still criminally responsible. Okay? So, hindi siya exempted. Kahit na nakakaawa yung situation mo, once a crime is committed, it should be punished. Unless they fall under the exempting circumstances such as insanity and the others. Okay? So I hope we're clear with this classification. Let's jump into the last classification, which is the criminal by passion. So criminal by passion are those criminals, criminal by passion are those criminals who commit crime because of anger, love, or honor. So basically, those criminals who, ito yung mga tinatawag nating nagdilim yung kanilang paningin, that's why they committed the crime. Criminal by passion. So halimbawa, sa sobrang selos, si Mr. Pedro, pinatay niya yung kanyang asawa, pinatay niya yung kanyang karelasyon dahil sa sobrang selos niya. So if he committed the crime because of that situation, because of that reason, then he will be classified as criminal by passion. Bakit? Because Mr. Pedro will not commit the crime if hindi siya nagselos ng sobra-sobra. In what instances kaya na pwedeng mangyari yun? Of course, meron tayong mga circumstances na kung saan nakita mo yung asawa mo na merong kalaguyo, may ginagawang kalaswaan sa ibang lalaki, and because of that, nagdilim yung paningin mo, pinatay mo siya, then you committed the crime, right? You committed the crime. And the reason why you committed that is because of your extreme jealousy. So, our law provides remedy for these cases. The criminal law provides remedy for these cases. It's either they're going to exempt the person of his criminal liability or they're going to mitigate, pababain nila yung kanyang parusa because it's justifiable that he committed that because of this. But then, that would be discussed in your criminal law. Kasi hindi ko isasali yan since we're just talking about these categories of crime according to Lombroso, and I should limit only my discussion to this and not go beyond criminal law. But then, it's important to note that there is a classification such as criminal by passion, yung mga nagko-commit ng crime dahil sa fit of anger, dahil sa emotion, motivated by extreme emotion, extreme bursts of emotion like anger, sobrang galit mo, kaya mo pinatay yung isang tao, sobrang galit mo kaya mo nasaktan yung isang tao, that is criminal by passion. Na sobrang pagmamahal mo kaya mo nasaktan yung isang tao, that is criminal by passion, given that they only committed the crime because of their extreme bursts of emotion and no other circumstances such as drugs, such as alcohol, and other circumstances which may na pwedeng makaapekto doon sa rationality ng isang tao. Okay? So ito yung mga category ng mga criminals na nag-commit lang ng crime because of emotions, extreme outbursts in their emotions. Okay? So that's the 4 categories of criminals according to Cesare Lombroso. I do hope you learned something from this discussion. If you have questions regarding this topic, comment those down on the comment section. And that's it for today. See you on the next lecture. Bye-bye.